Hi, my name is John Herbst, and I run the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Good morning to those in Washington, good afternoon to those in Europe, and good evening to those in Central Asia. We have a wonderful event today on the importance of Central Asia to the United States in a post-Afghan world. And we have an absolutely terrific panel with us this morning and afternoon and evening to discuss it. We have Lisa Curtis, the Senior Fellow and Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for New American Security, former Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Central and South Asia at the NSC. We have Ambassador Paula Dobriansky, the Vice Chair of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security at the Atlantic Council, a former Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs, and a Senior Fellow at the Future of Diplomacy Project at Harvard University's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. We have Senator Alisher Sadullayev, the Director of the Agency for Youth Affairs of Uzbekistan. And we have my old friend, Senator Sodiq Safoev, a close advisor to the President of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, and also a former ambassador to the United States and Foreign Minister of Uzbekistan. And as a special treat, we'll have joining us towards the end, Professor Akram Umarov, who's a visiting Fulbright Fellow at the University of Pittsburgh and a Senior Research Fellow at the University and World Forum for Diplomacy in Tashkent. So that's our event. Again, I welcome everyone to today's presentation. I will start with some questions for our fellows here, and I'll start with Ambassador Dobriansky. We are here to talk about great power competition and U.S. interests in Central Asia. But the big story, Paula, of course, is the U.S. and NATO withdrawal from Afghanistan. How do you see Chinese and Russian reaction to this, their next moves, and what does this mean for the United States?
First, welcome to our very esteemed guests. So we're really delighted that you're here today at the Atlantic Council. I have to say that as a board member, very heartfelt. And also congratulations to the Atlantic Council for holding this forum, because we're going to be addressing a topic that's crucial and I don't think has really been well investigated and well analyzed. So I'm looking so much forward to today's discussion. Your question, John, immediately, the issue of what happened in Afghanistan has great ramifications, certainly for Central Asia, for the region. What does it mean for Beijing and also Moscow? I'd first start with that clearly Beijing and Moscow are using the circumstance and the occasion actually to, and the debacle that took place, to actually heighten their influence in the region. It is of strategic importance, strategic location, so they are using it to heighten their power and their influence. Secondly, I would submit that they're using it well to also diminish U.S. influence, portray the United States with the withdrawal from Afghanistan as being weak, unpredictable, and difficult. And thirdly, it's striking to note that both Russia and China are retaining their embassies. We know the United States has pulled out, has also, their Bagram Air Base is no longer, our military pulled out. So they are retaining a presence. And what does that mean? That also means that there's a strong desire on their part to actually ensure that they are front seat players in terms of trying to maintain security and stability in the region. So in sum, what does this mean? It means that we're witnessing great power competition that is afoot definitively, and it's not just now, but this is going to continue on.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Safoev, the new policies introduced by President Mirziyoyev 5 years ago, especially his open foreign policy, have contributed greatly to stability and economic cooperation, perhaps even integration in Central Asia. Please describe the policies and their impact.
First of all, I'd like to express gratitude to Atlantic Council, to you personally, John, for organizing this event. It's very important for us these days to keep dialogue and to have a chance to address the people in Washington. We fully realize the importance for us to be here and to have a chance to exchange our views about the development in Central Asia and beyond, and to listen to our partners in Congress, in administration, and think tanks about the development in Central Asia. I think that as never before, we need dialogue today, and I once again express our I'd like to express appreciation for this chance to be here, and thank you, Ambassador Dobriansky, for a wonderful opening speech. I think that you covered very important issues. In regard with what happened in Central Asia in the recent 5 years, we might use only such a definition like dramatic change, and it's a change to the good. 5 years ago, Central Asia was in a different situation. There was a tension among the countries, many outstanding issues, which looks like impasse, and nobody knows how to resolve them. Today, we have more trust. Today, at last, we have a multilateral dialogue initiated by Tashkent, and readiness to all countries to tackle the issues like water management, border issues, trade, openness. And Central Asia today looks more unified and more ready to be to look like a region which might express its kind of a joint interest together. And it's important to